So here at Edge Products, we are extremely excited to announce our Jammer cold air intake systems. So basically we went and designed the new cold air intake system to go along with our tuning products. The nice part about this is we can actually design our tuning products to work even better with cold air intakes. And so since we have our own intake system, we can design and develop around that process. So basically right now I shown right here on the table is we have our 6.7 liter Cummins engine. This is for the 2010 to 12 Cummins application. You have your big cold air intake box, you have your oiled filter, and we have an intake tube here with all the parts and pieces to put it together. Some things that you'll notice about the Jammer intake system is a larger diameter tube, less bends to help restrict the airflow so it's cleaner and smoother airflow going into the turbo. We do have our oiled filter, which will be we will have a dry filter option later on, or you can replace it with a dry filter from us. But we want the oil filter to help keep out dust, particulate filters, and keep it clean that way. And then the intake box itself. So the Jammer intake system, of course, is like an intake system where it's designed to bring in as much cold air or as much hot air as possible or air as possible and return it into cold air and deliver that cooler air into the motor, into the turbo. Basically, cooler air is denser air, so denser air actually can create more energy for the diesel engine to add performance. So basically that's what we're doing here at the Jammer intake, is adding that dense air into the vehicle, giving a better fluent, better run, helps out the throttle response because it's helps spool the turbo a little bit quicker. Basically, and then combined with the tuning, you get the full complete package of the Jammer intake. But what we're going to do today is we're actually going to go through, we're looking at the Jammer intake on a 6.7 here, and we're going to actually go and install one. We're going to dyno it, we're going to check it out and see what kind of power gains it has and what kind of performance it has that way, monitor some EGTs on it and stuff like that. But to show you how it works and introduce the Jammer intake system to you from Edge Products. Today we're going to do an install with our new Jammer kit. We're going to use a 2011 Ram Cummins. Basically with this new Jammer kit, it's available for Ford, GM, and Dodge Ram applications. So today on our 2011, it's going to fit a 2010 to 2012 6.7 liter Cummins motor. Basically this is the kit that you'll get. So when you open it up, you can see we have our install guide, our EO sticker compliancy, the Edge product brochure, filter. It is an oiled filter like we mentioned before, our box with the Edge logo on it, a larger intake tube for better free flowing air, and all the accessories to mount it. One thing to note that we do provide all the hardware to install the kit. So some of your hardware that you remove from the stock filter, you do need to keep it for your stock replacement, but we will put new parts in there. So for your mass airflow sensor, we have new screws installed with it as well. So this is basically the kit for the 2010 to 2012 6.7 liter Cummins engine. Now we'll go over here and show you how it installs and do some dyno testing and see the results of it. Alright guys, so we just gone through and removed the stock intake. As you can see, it's no longer there, the tube's gone, everything. It's a pretty simple process. As long as you have all the right tools to do it, shouldn't take you longer than 20-30 minutes to remove it. Couple things to note is in here there are some mounts, grommets in here that you will remove, and you'll replace them with our stock one so we can bolt our intake box to it. As well as the stock screw here that holds your mount in place, and the grommet, keep a hold of it. As you can see here, I've gone ahead already and removed my mass airflow sensor, as well as the intake air temperature sensor. So I put these aside over here for now. We'll reinstall those here in just a minute. The other thing to note is on some applications, there is a stock air filter reminder. This truck does not have one. It would go right here when you pull it out of your box. So since it does not have one, we'll put our stock supply plug into that hole here in a minute. So we'll kind of go through the process here and start installing our new Jammer intake on the truck. First steps that we're going to do here is install our new mounting support brackets down here on the bottom for the intake box. And so there's two of these. They'll just go right in the hole and plug them in. I know you can't see these hard, but it's pretty simple right in there. So once we have those in place, we can actually install our box here. So our box is going to have the intake air filter coming over here. And once it goes in place, you can see the holes will line up to the boxes below. Okay, off of that part, we can then take our supplied bracket arm here, can mount right there with our stock supplied sensor. We will reuse the stock bolt, so make sure you don't get rid of that bolt when we go back to supplying this in there. So we'll go ahead and start mounting this stuff securely. Make sure you don't tighten everything up until all the screws and bolts are in place so you can actually move it around if you need to on your truck. Basically, we can put those bolts in here. We have some 2 bolts. Each of them have supplied washers on this truck. We'll just go ahead and kind of put those in there and finger tighten them for a second so they're in place and the box isn't moving while we're doing the other part of the install here. All right, those are finger tight here. Now is what I'm gonna do is go ahead and install this mounting bracket to the side of the box here with our washer. Again, I'm just gonna do it finger tight until we get everything lined up and in place. Okay, got that lined up there. Install the stock bolt back into the frame to hold the filter in place. All right, so everything's kind of tight there. What we're going to do now is just go through and tighten everything tight since they're in place so it's secure and it doesn't move. All right, so last one under here. Just going to go in here, tighten it up. All right, now we have our lid. We're gonna install our intake air temperature sensor. When you're putting it in, you might need to wiggle a little bit here. Just gonna get it right in place. And then you'll have your stock screw that will bolt into here. All right, just get it nice and tight. You don't need to over tighten that little screw there. From there, we're gonna get ready to put it. I'm just gonna place it over here out of the way for a second. All right, so I installed the intake air temp sensor. Now we're going to do our mass airflow sensor. So basically on the mass airflow sensor, we have our supplied grommet that you can put on there. The important thing to do is make sure you don't touch the end of these. And if it is dirty, it's a great time to clean it. Once we have that installed in place, same thing as one we did before. Use the supplied screws provided by Edge. Go in the holes. These are very important that you use our supplied screws. If you use the stock screws in these port, they can strip the holes and not leave the mass airflow sensor tight. So we're gonna tighten them here. We don't want to overstrip these screws into the intake tube, but we do want to make them nice and tight so there's no airflow coming in or out of that area right there. All right, and that's how you install the mass airflow sensor into the inlet tube. Now that we have our box securely fastened, we're gonna put the top on. So what we're gonna do is grab our intake filter here. Like we talked about before, it is an oiled filter. As you can see, it's clean. Make sure there's no debris inside or outside that you're gonna get locked in. Grab your lid, and it's gonna go right onto that there. All right, we have our intake securely in there. You can see it's kind of a squarish, so if you wanna line it up with the box, see up here on the lines, want to try to keep it lined up so it fits in the box cleanly. Looks pretty good to me there. Now that we have the intake on the box, we're going to grab our supplied hose clamps. As you notice, there's a few of them in the case. Get the longest one that's going to fit around the intake. So we want to make sure we have the one that's going to fit. You can install it around. With the hose clamp, you can either use a screwdriver or you can use a ratchet there, depending on which style you want to try. For us, we're just going to use a screwdriver. It's easy to get in and out of with it. If you want to make sure it's clear and tight, bolt or socket may help you a little bit here. So. All right, so we've got that nice and tight on there in the hose clamp. If you notice on here, I put it over here underneath this corner. If you put it up here on the side, it may run into the box filter, so if you put it over here in the corner where there's more room, it will hide better when you go do the install of the intake. At this time, we'll lay this here, grab our accordion tube here. Basically, we're going to install this onto the intake top lid with our hose clamps again. Make sure you grab the right size to go on here, get everything situated so we can start installing the intake tube into the turbo. So we'll just install that real quick. All right, looks like it's nice and tight. Again, it's important to make sure these are on all the way onto the inlet where you need to be, as well as being nice and tight. We don't want no air sucking in here and getting any dirt particulate filter into our turbo anyway. So make sure it's good and double tight. Okay, we got those part done there. Since we have these two parts done here with the
that's ready to install. We're gonna set that over to the side for a minute. All right, since we moved that out of the way, we're gonna put the tube on our turbo. Basically what we're gonna do is take our hose clamps, one on this side of it, tighten on the turbo there, put the other hose clamp there so it's ready to install the intake tube. Make sure this is all the way onto the turbo. You can see where it's been clean or dirty from the stock turbo, so you can see how far you need to get it on there. By getting it on there all the way, that helps us tighten up tight and then it doesn't come off while you're driving down the road and have an issue sucking in air into your turbo that way. So when I'm down there, I'm going to install these. Once I'm done with installing that, we'll come back up and talk to you about the next part. All right, now that we have our tube on there tight, we actually are going to get ready to install the intake tube on here. Once we install that intake tube, we also have our PVC tube. It's going to go into the vehicle and then onto our intake tube outlet. So you can see here, it'll basically connect between those two. So it's going to get a little tight in there, but we'll install those two and get that process done. All right, so now we have the PCV tube on, the inlet tube onto the turbo. Everything's secure that way. We're going to move back up to the top of the intake and finish the installation off here. All right, now we have everything on installed down there. Put the lid and intake in. This is where the accordion piece comes in nice because we can actually bend it around to fit over our intake tube here. But basically we'll install the intake tube there, tighten it up, and we're almost finished. Once the hose clamp starts to tighten up here, you can adjust it to where it's in place and everything's lined up in the grooves and slots so it stays nice and tight on your intake tube. All right, now that we have the intake tube on, we're going to connect our connector here. We're basically going to do the intake air temperature sensor first. Plug it in until it snaps and locks. We have 3 provided bolts here. We're going to provide them in each hole, line it up. Easy way to do this is just put each one in first, finger tight. And then once you have them all lined up, you can come back through and tighten them down. Make sure the bolts are nice and tight so there's no air leak inside the box. All right, last thing here, we're gonna plug back in our mass airflow sensor connector. Again, there's a red tab here. Once this is the locking tab, once it's plugged in, slide that over to make sure it stays locked in place and it doesn't go anywhere. All right, we have everything installed. I'm gonna do a quick run through, make sure everything's tight, ready to go. And then we're gonna do a dyno run and check out the before and afters with the new Edge intake jammer kit.